Hi, my name is Joseph Munoz, and today we are going to be looking at women in positions of power and in positions of authority and how they are written in their respective shows. We're going to be taking a look at Press Secretary C.J. Craig and First Lady Abigail Bartlett from The West Wing, and we're going to be looking at Detective Olivia Benson and Detective Amanda Rollins from Law and Order Special Victims Unit. Our question today is: in what ways do Detective Olivia Benson and Amanda Rollins in Law and Order SVU, and Press Secretary C.J. Craig and First Lady Abigail Bartlett in The West Wing resist and/or reinforce gender stereotypes? The first show we're going to be looking at is The West Wing. The West Wing is a serialized drama where each episode has impacts and consequences for the next episode. We're going to see how they treat two of their female characters and how their agency and their power are sort of taken away depending on what the episode requires of them. The first character we're going to look at is CJ Craig in episode 3 of season 1, titled A Proportional Response. CJ Craig is the press secretary, and so her job is obviously to handle the public image of the president and the White House. In this episode, CJ's treatment in this episode is emblematic of how she is treated throughout the first season of The West Wing, where she is only a tool to solve the problems that the men in the show are having. Now, as a press secretary, her job is to protect the image of the president, but she's also solving personal issues with the male characters that otherwise wouldn't be her job to solve. She is expected to have all the answers for these characters. She's expected to not be offended by these characters when they lash out at her. And she's overall expected to be someone who will just do what she's told and not really have any sort of impact on the story herself. We can see this in this episode where Sam finally goes to CJ after CJ has already found out about his relationship with the call girl and acts like there was no big deal because he already went to two other individuals. But in reality, we see that CJ is offended. She's upset because she wanted to be able to do her job and she wasn't able to. The other character we're going to look at is Abigail Bartlett in the episode The White House Pro Am, which is episode 17 of season 1. She is the main conflict in this episode because she goes on national TV in support of a child labor issue without consulting the president's staff or the president, and she favors a nominee for the federal chair without consulting the president or the president's staff. This episode in particular shows us how women are treated throughout the course of the show. She, for the first 30 minutes, is treated as a nuisance, as someone who is getting in the way of the president's agenda, as someone who is purposely trying to set up roadblocks, when in reality she is just trying to get an issue that she believes is important front and center. And by the end of the episode, even though her and the president have made up, her issue is still put to the side and relegated to the end of episode, Bill will work on in the future rather than having a concrete solution for the problem that she felt was important. And while she's being criticized for getting in the president's way and ruining the agenda, she's also expected to patch things up with a female congresswoman who is threatening to ruin another bill in support of her own child labor bill. So essentially, she's expected to sabotage and go against her best interests to make sure that the president can do what he needs to do. The next show we're going to look at is Law and Order Special Victims Unit. This is a less serious show than The West Wing. It doesn't have great writing. The characters aren't as well written because it's much quicker produced. There's a lot more episodes. There's 20 seasons of the dang show. But there's still something to learn from the characters Detective Olivia Benson, who's considered the main character, and Detective Amanda Rollins. The first character we're going to take a look at from SVU is Olivia Benson from season 15, episode 1. At the end of season 14, she was kidnapped, and in season 15, we are going to look at her attempt to escape, her eventual successful escape, and how she's affected in the very next case she works. The main problem with this episode is how it follows a trend of as soon as Olivia got any sort of power after becoming a sergeant, she is kidnapped and tortured several times to the point where it's a constant theme of Olivia is hurt or she is tortured or she is abused, and it really takes away from her ability to be a leadership figure and her ability to take control of a squad. The second character we're going to take a look at is Detective Amanda Rollins in episode 16 of season 15, titled Gambler's Fallacy. This episode starts off with known gambling addict Detective Amanda Rollins in an illegal casino where she is losing a lot of money. She's clearly extremely drunk, and what happens is she eventually gets found out by the club boss, and the club boss recognizes her as a cop and threatens to expose her to her job, ruining her life, ruining her career if she doesn't do what they tell her to do, which includes falsifying records, hiding evidence, lying on the stand. But at the end of the episode, she ends up being saved by the club boss, who turns out to be a undercover vice detective. So in an episode where they're trying to give her more in-depth character by having her relapse on her gambling addiction, she's actually just saved by another male character. Looking ahead to some of the research, we have this article by Yu Wei Gay describing the rape of Claire Underwood in House of Cards and how that was written in a way where Claire Underwood would come back from her traumatic experience, as opposed to Olivia, who does come back from, but more in a the story kind of forgets that it happened way, unless that a character grows from it way. And then we have this article by Racia Ulfa that basically states that symbolic violence and actual violence can lead to the idea that violence against certain subgroups is okay and it shouldn't be considered something out of the normal. And then we have this article by Scott Parrott describing how white women are more likely to be victims of sexual assault and rape in television shows. And I think that's really accurate for Amanda because she is definitely more of a victim of powerful men and of sexually disadvantageous situations over the course of this episode. Another article that really relates to Amanda is this article by Sue Turnbull, which describes how even though women are now accepted in these powerful positions, like being a detective in the NYPD, she's still not given the credit she's deserved, and her faults are more exasperated than a male detective's would be. Moving ahead to the West Wing, we have this article by Sierra Bray that examines how, when you write a character that defies typical female stereotypes, they're looked at differently, even if they're fictional characters, such as CJ Craig. She's given a position of power, and yet she's still not really treated the same as her male coworkers. Again, looking at CJ Craig, we have this article by Ofra Kaufman that talks about how girls who are trying to organize or trying to start a movement look up to celebrities specifically, and how, for example, demeaning someone like CJ Craig in a television show that a lot of people watch, it could have a negative effect on the young girls or women who are watching it. And finally, looking at Abby Bartlett, we have this article that while it talks about mainly black viewers and black actors, it does have this reference to how the standard for women is considered the stereotypical white middle class woman, and how that's kind of what Abigail Bartlett is expected to be. She's expected to be the obedient housewife to the President of the United States. And finally, we have this article by Myrna Hunt that talks about how older women in television are being portrayed differently and how they're less about not having kids and more about being more emotionally mature, which Abigail Bartlett definitely acts over the course of the rest of the West Wing. What my research shows is that no matter how well it seems that a character, specifically female characters, are portrayed in media, there's always ways they can be improved upon for the betterment of the young women who are watching said media.